Now that you know the parts of the ear, we can take a look at exactly how hearing occurs. So we begin with sound waves. So sound waves are in the air, and they travel through the air, they go into your ear canal, and they go down your ear canal. When they get to the end of your ear canal, they hit your eardrum. This causes the eardrum to vibrate. The eardrum is attached to those middle ear bones. So here we have the malleus, the incus, and the stapes. So when the eardrum vibrates, it causes those bones to vibrate. So let's look a little more closely at the function of these auditory ossicles. So remember, they transmit and amplify the sound. So the transmit part is that they vibrate from the eardrum vibrating, and they are going to go here. And remember, it attaches to the oval window. So the eardrum vibrates. So sound waves make the eardrum vibrate. That makes the bones vibrate. And when the stapes vibrates, it makes the oval window vibrate. And the oval window is part of the inner ear. So that's how you transmit the sound waves from the external ear to the inner ear. Okay, then the amplify part. They allow us to hear softer noises. So it intensifies the sound waves. It makes our hearing better. So the amplify part intensifies the sound. This allows us to hear quiet sounds like a whisper or pin drop. Look at the size of the eardrum. So here's the size of the eardrum from here to here. Those sound waves are transmitted to the oval window. If you look at its size from here to here, there's a big difference in the size of the eardrum and the oval window. So the eardrum is much larger than the oval window. So you have a large surface to catch the sound waves. Then you concentrate them down onto a small surface. An analogy would be walking on soft, slightly muddy ground in different types of shoes. Suppose it has rained and the ground is soft, not soupy mud, just kind of soft. And you are walking in tennis shoes. No problem. Your weight is spread out over the whole shoe. However, if you try walking in high heels on that same ground, you're going to sink, because now the same weight, you weigh the same no matter which shoes you're wearing, but your weight is concentrated on a small surface, that little heel. So now the same weight, but because it's concentrated on a small surface, it's intense enough to break through the ground and sink down. It's the same idea here. You have a large surface capturing the sound waves, and then they're concentrated onto a small surface. So that's how the middle ear bones amplify. Next, we'll look at what happens in the middle ear. The inner ear. So now that we have the oval window vibrating, that creates waves in this fluid. So the cochlea is filled with fluid. This creates waves in the fluid. Now this picture, they've kind of unwound the cochlea, but remember, it looks like a snail. It's all wound up. The waves travel through the fluid until they can't fit anymore. Then they cross through like this, and then the waves will go back this way. When the wave crosses through, it bends little hairs called cilia. When it bends those cilia, that sends a signal to the brain. And the signal goes through the vestibulocochlear nerve. Remember, cranial nerve number 8. So now maybe the name of that nerve is starting to make sense. Vestibulo for the vestibule, where your balance is, and cochlear for the cochlea, where your hearing is. And if you remember from chapter 13, this goes to your temporal lobe. That's where hearing is. Okay, now we still have this sound wave we have to dissipate. So step 7 here, it flows back to the round window. The round window dissipates the wave energy. Okay. Think of a swimming pool. If you're in a swimming pool and you're jumping around and you're making waves, the waves go to the edge of the pool, they hit it, and they bounce back. In your ear, you don't want any waves bouncing back. So think about what you could do in your swimming pool to make it so that the waves you make as you're jumping around will go to the edge and then they dissipate. Well, if you put a pillow there, say you hung a pillow over the edge of the pool, waves aren't going to bounce off of a pillow. The pillow will dissipate the wave energy. That's what the round window does. These waves flow through this fluid, they hit the round window, and then instead of bouncing back and creating echoes in your head, the round window dissipates the wave energy. So this prevents the waves from bouncing back. This is showing a couple of important muscles in the middle ear. Remember, these auditory ossicles vibrate. So these are small, delicate bones. And they vibrate in response to sound waves. The louder the sound, the more they vibrate. Well, a really loud sound could vibrate them so much that they could break. So loud sounds can be dangerous for them. So you have a couple of muscles. You have the stapedius, and you have the tensor tympani. These muscles tense in response to loud sounds. And they restrict the bones from vibrating too much. Now we also need to look at how the ear detects different sounds. So here's back to that picture of the cochlea. And remember, it is spiraled up like a snail. And notice that it gets narrower as you go around. So here at the beginning, it's pretty wide. Okay, then it spirals around, and as it spirals around, it gets more narrow. Here's a view of the cochlea, but this time it is unwound. So here's an unwound cochlea. Now remember, this is not what it actually looks like. This is just so we can see what's going on in there. It gets more narrow as you go toward the tip. So here at the start, it's going to be wide, and when you get to the end, it's going to be narrow. So tall sound waves, so this red one here is a tall wave. It can't get very far. It has to cross through close to the beginning. Here we have this green one is kind of a medium wave. And And you can see it gets about halfway through. So it'll cross through a little further. Then we have this dark blue one is a low wave. It's a short wave. And see, it gets all the way to the end. Okay, tall waves are high-pitched sounds. Short waves are low-pitched sounds. So you can detect different sounds based on where they cross through. So when this cilia signals the brain, your brain knows that it is a high sound. When this cilia signals the brain, your brain knows it is a medium sound. And when this cilia signals the brain, your brain knows it is a low sound. So when you hear like a high-pitched squeal, that is the cilia here at the beginning, telling you that high-pitched squeal. When you hear like Edward Earl Jones narrating, that's coming from down here, that really deep voice. An interesting thing, as you age, you start to lose your hearing. Think about it. All sound waves have to pass through the beginning, but only really low sounds make it to the end. So the beginning of your cochlea gets a lot of action over the years. The end of your cochlea doesn't get nearly as much. So damage occurs at the beginning. So that's where hearing loss starts. So as you age, you lose your ability to hear some of the high-pitched sounds. So there's this interesting thing you can do, a hearing test. And this hearing test...
As we grow older, we often lose the extreme ends of our hearing spectrum. So how many of the following sounds can you hear? How old are your ears? Okay, if you can hear 8,000 Hertz, you're both alive and not hearing impaired. But let's keep raising the frequency. How high could you hear? If you could hear all of those frequencies, you're probably under 20 years old, but that won't last forever. Unlike other organs such as the liver or skin, the inner ear does not have the capacity to regenerate. In your ear, there are thousands of tiny nerve cells called hair cells. These are responsible for picking up different frequencies and sending the signal to the brain where it's processed. But as you age, the continual exposure to noise and loud sounds can break, bend, and destroy these cells. So why do the high frequencies go first? It turns out that the hairs tuned to high pitches are the first to encounter sound waves. As a result, they experience more stress and tend to degenerate earlier, which is why the older you are, the harder it is to hear high pitches. Got a burning question you want answered? Ask it.